Ladies and gentlemen, welcome out to the Robbie Law Podcast. Very excited to have Taylor Goodrich with me today. Taylor is actually, we've known each other for 20 years. We'll bring that up here in a minute. I think we're going to drop a bombshell is the plan, like from the very beginning. But, you know, I have Taylor here. Taylor is the author of OctoberStrong. If you haven't already picked that book up yet, it is the only novel that I've been able to read in like a decade because it actually kept my attention. I was so interested. I always read personal development books, but this was the book that I was really able to pay attention to, and here's the author sitting right here in front of me. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Super cool, Robbie. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else, dude.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. You came up here. You've got a convention or something. You're up here training, and kind of last minute. But I am so interested to learn more about your story, about how you wrote this book, because, like I said, I read it and I didn't know all of the events of what happened in Las Vegas. I just knew that it was a big event. And in OctoberStrong was about this event that happened in Vegas. And I know that you had said that you'd wanted to write a book, but I didn't know the whole story. So if we could start with just a little bit of that. Tell us about why you wanted to write a book.
Ooh, how long is this podcast? Like 2 hours?
Yeah.
Well, first off, I got to say, like, I never wanted to be an author. Like, that was never my hopes, dreams, or never in the cards. It wasn't. The story itself, of the shooting at the Mandalay Bay, it's something that I don't know if people even want to know about it. You know what I mean? So it was a touchy subject. I wanted to be able to pour my heart out and be an artist, if you will, in one way or another. And just the book thing ended up organically happening. It started, of me basically collecting stories throughout my career, and not stories about me or things that I did, just stories of things I'd seen, So I've been collecting, not journaling per se, but I've been keeping track of cool things that's happened throughout my career. I've kind of felt like some of these things you never hear about, you never see it, and so I just want to tell stories that nobody would ever see or nobody would ever hear.
Yeah, and to give some background, because I failed to do this, your background is SWAT, right?
Yep.
And so in SWAT, you're experiencing a whole lot, and you're seeing a whole lot of things, and so a lot happens in connection with working with the fire department, in working with the EMTs, and in working with police officers. And so there's a lot that you have experienced. And so these are the stories that you kind of were keeping track of. Were you keeping them like in a journal? Like, do you have like a story journal or?
This kind of sounds weird, but I've kept every single police report I've ever wrote in my entire career, like every one of them. But there were times where like something would happen at work and I'm like, oh, that's hilarious. Like I'm going to forget about this if I don't put it down. So like I would just put it on like a Microsoft Word document, print it out, and throw it in an envelope. But the book itself, kind of how it developed was, I was involved in a shooting, several years ago. And when you're involved in a shooting, you get some time off, right? So I was at home on administrative leave, and one of my good buddies, he's a former SEAL sniper, and he's like, he could see that I was like in a dark place and not doing well in my life. And which nobody else could see, by the way, because, like, very chameleon-like, I got to, I'm fine, I'm tough, I got it. But those who knew, like, no,
Yeah.
And my buddy, he saw it in my eyes and stuff, and he's like, dude, like, we need to go have some lunch. And so we met up, and he told me basically, like, hey, write down the whole incident, as detailed as you could, and then put it in an envelope and never read it again. And like I told you, I was big into journaling and that kind of stuff, but I didn't write this one down. I didn't want to on purpose because it sucked. So I did, I listened to that advice and I wrote it down, but I didn't write it like, a police report would be written. I wrote it almost like third person, like, he turned left and saw this. And so I wrote it out, and it was pretty lengthy, the whole incident from like the minute I got there to the minute I got home, and then a little after too. To this day, it's still in that envelope. I licked it. I've not looked at it at all. But when I wrote down those words, it was really therapeutic. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't like going to doctors and talking about my feelings and that kind of stuff. It just...
It don't seem like the type.
No. It wasn't a bravado thing either, Robbie. It was just like, I don't know. I don't want to hear from somebody telling me something that I already know. Like, oh, you should quit drinking. Yeah. Really?
Thanks.
Like, duh. I know this, right?
Yeah, work out.
Yeah.
Eat better.
Yeah, go to the gym more.
Yeah, here's some pills.
Exactly. So I didn't... Anyway, so while I was on administrative leave, that felt really good to just put my heart out there on the paper and write down what happened. And I found myself like really getting into writing more and more of things, the things I'd seen. But for me, the therapy came when I would tell like a story, and this sounds so goofy. I hate saying this, but like, like kind things, like cops being kind and like doing things like that nobody would ever know about, and like good things that people did, because the bad stuff hits the news, right? So writing down the stories of like mostly friends of mine, things that they did that got overlooked or not noticed, like those kind of stories like really started to like feel really good to write. And then rather than like turn to the bottle, you know, I would just write down a story. If I was, you know, okay, I'm gonna admit it here, like to your podcast folks, but I was a little bit of a crybaby. You know, there were times where I'd cry, but you know, sitting down when the tears would come out and just like typing away, like the way I felt and the way that things were, like writing down the good stories was super therapeutic for me. So
man, that is so
that's
good.
how it started.
It's so good because, and it's sad that you really, what we see so often in the news, and you know, I mean, even just in social media feeds and everything, is just the stuff that gets our attention, and sometimes what gets attention is not the good stuff.
For sure.
Know? And then it's like the nice guys finish last type thing, you know. The kindness and the compassion that people show sometimes doesn't like showcases this beautiful, really, you know, highly engaging thing for us, but that's the moment, you know. I love this because that's the way I felt when I read OctoberStrong. I was like, there was moments I was like so attached to the characters where I was like, this is such a good person, you know. Louder, are they connected? I was like, are they talking to God? Is like, how is this working, you know? And, you know, it's funny because, you know, learning later about one of the characters, you know, which we're going to talk about, and going, oh my gosh, I know this person. You know, it was interesting for me because I saw it immediately and I felt it.
Speaking of the one, which we won't out yet, but what point did you, sorry, I'm interviewing you now. What point did you realize who he was?
Someone had told me maybe 2 chapters in. Okay. So I knew 2 chapters in that my brother was going to be in this. And so I was kind of looking for it, you know, and so I was waiting for it to happen. So I wish that I would have gone in not knowing, but I think I still would have come to the conclusion and put him in that scenario.
You would have figured it out.
Just because, you know, the Vegas thing, the fire department, you know, but
his name,
the love and compassion, and then his name, obviously.
It would have been a big clue.
So, you know, but that, like, hearing the one where he paused and then, like, said, no, I got to go back, and he went back somewhere. I'm like, that is so my brother. And I used to, like, judge him for some of that stuff because he would do it, and I'd be like, come on, man, over the top, bro. But he's over the top good.
He is.
You know, just over the top. And it was cool to read his own experience that he had, even though it was dramatized or whatever, and go, man, in that situation, there are a few people that have that much compassion for humanity.
Dude, totally,
you know?
100%.
And I know my brother's one of them, you know?
Yeah.
So did we just out him?
So Clarence Clarence in the book is based off of, and the stories belong to your brother, Jason. Jason Law, my hero, one of many.
Oh, man, to hear you say that gave me such chills because I think of this high school kid that I just despised, man. He was just...
He's always been a bigger-than-life figure, even though he's like this tall.
Yeah, no, in high school, I didn't despise him. I looked up to him so much. I wanted to be just like him, but he was just so different. He was, like, arrogant and intense and competitive, and, you know, he pushed and pushed and pushed, and that's what made him who he is, because he was hardest worker, and, you know, he was the guy that I would watch and go, I want to be more like him. And, you know, as he progressed, and I know there's a lot that he goes through, to see him handling, you know, certain areas of his life with such dignity and class, because he knows he can make an impact. You know, I know every time he steps into his fireman shoes or whatever you do, I mean, he never takes them off, to be honest, but he's the type of person that takes the time to do the right thing too often.
Yeah.
You know?
No joke. I mean, I remember growing up as a young kid, like looking up to you and looking up to Jason. Like, you guys were always like, man, your relationship.
No way, me?
For sure.
Give me a break.
No, dude, I've always I'm like, man, I want to be like Robbie, or I want to be like Jason. Like, because, you know, I was like the little kid, and you guys would allow me to be there, you know? Like, you guys would be doing the cool stuff. stuff. And I was like the dorky little kid that was allowed to come hang out with the cool kids for a few minutes. So I always looked up to you, and I always looked up to Jason. And, you know, it's like everything he's done in his whole life is like turned to gold. Like, I've never seen him fail until I did. You know what I mean? Like, Jason's the kind of guy that everything he touches is successful. Everybody he meets loves him. I've never met anyone who doesn't like him. But then watching recently, you know, and I'm going to say it, and he's probably going to get mad at me for saying this, but watching him over the last couple years, just like, just stuff that he's seen and dealt with at work. Like, you know, just trauma, dealing with pulling out, you know, pediatric drownings and stuff like that. The stuff that he's the Superman character in my life, just bawl and cry on the floor one day. You know what I mean? And like, when I wanted to put Jason's stories in this, you know, like him and I sat down for hours and hours and hours going over it, and he would tell me the stories and I'd write them down. And then I remember when it was done, I mean, Jason was struggling, and I was too, you know, at that point. Like, him and I were both in like a struggle, like with what's going on in our brains. We're in the very, very similar shoes, you know. Mine was a shooting, but his is having to deal with all the, you know, the stuff that they see at work.
Yeah.
It's one thing to see a dead bad guy. Like, it sucks. It's not fun. But it's easier to take than, like, pulling a kid out of a pool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when you have to do that time and over again, like, people think that we have PTSD. Like, they have no idea, like, what a firefighter sees. Because nobody expects to see a kid in a pool day in and day out, right? So when I read Jason, like, that first chapter where Clarence has that little, that little girl in the pool, like, that's his story. Like, that actually happened to Jason. And when I read it to him, like, he's just sitting there, like, bawling, and so is Paige, and everybody's just bawling. And I'm trying to read this thing to these guys, and I'm like, guys, stop it. Like, keep it together. I'm trying to read this, and, like, I couldn't, like, just even finish a sentence because, like, there was so much emotion, you know?
Oh, my gosh, man.
But that's, yeah, you're right.
Life is so precious.
Dude.
And when you get to witness miracles, and you get to witness people who are miracles, you know,
for sure,
it's worth noting. So my brother is incredible. I'm so grateful for him. These stories are so powerful, and learning more about, you know, how you kind of came to the conclusion to include the ones that you did was one of the things I asked you about. Like, you know, you put some of these in. Were there some that, as you were going through and compiling stories, that met inside the book, but you didn't use them, or maybe you felt they were too big or anything? How did you how did you create the storyline for this?
Good question. There was one story that wasn't included in there, and I won't go into why specifically. Basically, when I finished it, the person didn't give me their permission, and I'll kind of leave it at that. I really admire this person greatly. It's a person I look up to, but they didn't really want me telling the story.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Had I had that ability to put that in where, and this person knows and agrees with me, it would have been a different level. And it's already good. But there was one story that did not get in there, and I'm hoping someday to be able to tell it, be honest with you. But as far as compiling them, I had a stack of just like random events and cool, kindness and compassion and all the things that we try and be, that we fall short. But I had all these cool stories, firefighter, cop, nurse, EMT, veteran, and we had all these stories, and I didn't know how to like make it into anything more than just a pile of poo, So I actually owe a ton to Caitlin, my little sister, because when the Mandalay Bay shooting happened, and I've been collecting these stories for years, right? And I've always thought I wanted to put them down. But when the Mandalay Bay shooting happened, and when that was all said and done with, I remember just driving in my truck one day, and like a light bulb came on. I'm like, oh, I got it. I know how I'm going to do it. I know how I'm going to like weave them together at that event, because there was so much, as evil and bad as that day was, I can't even stress like the evil that was felt that day. Like, it was horrendous, it was super bad. But the good things that I saw that day, like, overshadowed the evil. I want to be able to tell like how it felt that day on the good side of things, if that makes sense. So Caitlin, my little sister, gave her all the stories, and we kind of sat down there. We actually just threw up a whiteboard, and we're like, okay, this guy, he's going to do this. And we kind of like developed a plot and these characters and stuff like that. And it ended up flowing pretty good.
It did. It flowed so well.
Yeah. And chronological and bouncing in time frames. It was tough. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a very smart guy. And so like weaving these things together in an artistic way.
I can't wait for the next one, and you better write another one. Like, there needs to be another one.
There's one coming.
Okay, good. The character Clarence, I know, are the other characters based on people, or are they based on experiences, or? or individual, like a persona of a person, or actual individuals?
Every single character in that book has somebody in my head.
Yeah.
So,
okay, well, I'm not going to ask you for the rest of them.
Yeah.
I like that we can just reveal this one.
Yeah,
Maybe
from
next year.
Dean to Greg
Yeah.
to Clarence, every single one of them, like Dean's a real person, Greg's a real person, Clarence is a real person, and their stories are real too. And so it made it very easy to tell like what I feel about somebody or what I experience about somebody with them in my mind. Some of the time frames we kind of jump around. The only character that's in that book that's actually named by name, and then I got permission from his widow, is Larry Burns. So the commander, Larry Burns, the big, tall, larger-than-life guy, he was a huge influence in my growing up and why I came to choose my career path. He passed away about a year or so ago, and I got permission from his wife to use his name. And even though the Larry Burns stories are not actually what Larry did, I wanted to show people, like, in the book, Mike looked up to Larry, just this larger-than-life, figure, and that was Larry for me. So I actually used Larry's name, although his stories belong to somebody else. I wanted to give Larry a little bit of homage or just respect, I guess, for the mountain of man he was to me.
Yeah. Man, you said something earlier that really just sparked my mind. You said, firefighters put on their, they're proud to be firefighters. And, cops, they don't put the cops on their thing. And it made me think of mental health issues, because, I know what you must go through in being in SWAT. I get a tiny glimpse of it because of my brother, who's an officer. And Officer Law, which I think is so funny.
Super cool name.
That's so cool.
He doesn't think it's that cool, but I love it.
think it's amazing. But, I know that, even having conversations with him, that, it's a heavy load to bear to be in the service of people and to be in the positions that you guys take. And, you mentioned my brother and his going through so much. And I've watched it, and I've watched him struggle. Him and I have been on many a conversation where I've been on the receiving end of his help, and he's been on the receiving end of mine. And when it comes to mental health, bringing awareness to what can be done. I think the thing that I want to talk to you about is you said somebody noticed something in you. What did it take for them to know that you were in that place where you needed to go out and he needed to say to you, what's going on? Like, what was it that he was able to do? Was it the relationship that you had with him? Was he seeking out, finding people? How can we help the person like you who's not willing to come and go, man, I need help?
That's a good question. That's a super good question. I think, and the guy that came to me originally who saw it, we weren't incredibly close. I mean, we're really good friends, but he's not like the guy I call every day for advice.
Yeah.
I think the reason why he saw it is because he's been there too. He's been in my shoes a lot.
Yeah.
You can imagine being a SEAL and then a SWAT sniper, you've been through it. And so him having been in that position, I think was easy for him to recognize just right here. I think, and I don't want to say like, cops or firefighters or nurses, we're the only ones that can have those struggles, right? You can call it mental health issues, you can call it PTSD, call it whatever you want. But, you could be in a cubicle working a 9-to-5 job and be struggling, on a lot of levels, because stress is stress. Your body, my body, a kid's body, they're responding to stress. Like, kids stressed about like his volcano, like not working for the school project, which is in 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
Like that body, that physiological response to stress is the same as like me going into a house where the guy's shooting. Like, it's the same. Now, people will like put it on different levels. It's not. It's like the same. So when we're talking about understanding it, there are certain people who've been in certain positions who can recognize it in someone else. And I think that's key. But doesn't mean that anybody can help out, right? But like my parents, they're great people. I love them to death, but they didn't know. My dad's a dentist and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, homemaker. They can't see it in your eyes, like, or if they do, they're like, "You okay? You look sad." That's it.
They don't have the same life experience to go through and see your trauma like in your energy.
No, and it's nothing on them. They just don't know. And they're great people. You know them. They're good folks. But
this is true. This will be true for everybody that's not been in those experiences. This is
100%.
why having mentors and people that have had experience before you are so important.
But basically, if you have somebody in your life And okay, first responder, sure, because the book really catered to them. But it goes for everybody. Like if you've got someone in your life and you know them really well, you know what their routine is, you know they wake up at this time, they go to bed at this time, they're smiling about this, they're laughing about that, and then all of a sudden you see that change, you know, like something's not right.
Yeah.
Let's, talk about it. And then the appropriate time is appropriate time, like in front of people or in public is probably not the time. Or bringing it up might not be the time, but like if they open the door to something, then you go through the door. Like if they bring up something in conversation, which could be their way of being like, hey, how about this? And they just bring it up, maybe even joking or in passing. They say, hey, something. You catch in on that phrase. Well, they just open the door for a conversation. Now you can have that conversation.
Yeah. I find myself in this position because in a lot of the rooms that I'm in, we're talking about situations where people are going through issues, and then they'll come talk to me after because I was one of the speakers or whatever. And it's a hard spot to be in, to know how to help someone and to know that they need help, but they're maybe not willing to showcase that to you yet. And they're not maybe even willing to accept help at that time. So even bringing it up could not be the right, way to go. So, for me, one of the things that I've noticed if I'm just casual with the request, where it's not like, hey, man, how are you? How are you doing?
Right.
But it's instead, hey, you good? I feel like that has worked for me when it comes to being able to get through to someone. And then it's about reading their response to you, and this is where, like, being in sales, I go, man, this is a really good trait to learn, is something called cold reading, and just being able to go, well, what's their actual response versus the one that they're trying to give me,
right.
Because you can feel it, see it, hear it, you can see it in their eyes or their words. I'm okay. Well, if they say I'm okay, then what does that mean? But I think we go, hey, how are you? And then people go, I'm okay. And we go, awesome. It's good that you're okay. It's like you didn't hear that
No.
I'm okay in there. Wasn't okay, But, I feel like in that situation, he was able to come to you and you were trusting him already. And it was mostly because of his experience. Do you feel like had your dad or mom come to you in that moment, you think you would have been open to them?
No, not at all. No. And that doesn't take away from my parents. I love them to death, but no, he's a guy I looked up to and understood it, He was somebody who was able to be like, look, dude, like, knock off this crap. I've been there. Here's how it helped me. I think there are people who reach out, and there are people who don't. And there's a million different ways that we can improve these issues, right? Some people it's going to the gym. Some people it's talking to a doctor. Some people, for me, it was writing, right? If we can just allow those people their own freedom to discover that outlet, because doctors don't work for everybody. Gym doesn't work for everybody. Writing's not going to work for everybody, right? So if there's somebody in your life who you care about and you notice that change and something's wrong, and you're not that person that has that relationship to be able to give them the advice that they're going to take, that unsolicited advice, to help them, if we can maybe just point them in the direction of something that would help, whatever it is. Like, do you want to go to the gym with me? I'm going in the morning. Let's go to the gym. Like, let's go work out. And then in the process of that workout, they may open up.
Yeah, it is amazing what just giving someone your time will do. I go back to the 5 love languages and stuff like this. I'm like, what do people want in this situation?
For sure.
You can give, sometimes I've been offered things like, someone gave me a book and it was like, hey man, I feel like this might be helpful for you. And it wasn't about mental health, but it was about ADHD. And it was called Delivered from Distraction. I remember going, okay. And that was a really loving gesture to receive that gift, There's times where it's, giving them time, and giving them of your, just sitting there with them, and being able to do that. But I do think that it's such good advice to say that everybody's different in their acceptance of that healing process and being able to let go of some of the trauma and anything they're going through. And for me, I journal. Like, I'm the same way. Like, I write in my journal a lot, and I go to the gym. And those are the things that I need to clear my mind to get me kind of to a whole place. They're very isolating, though. And one thing that you mentioned is you said, you want to point people in the right direction. Community is so important in that case. What do first responders do as far as how do they have the ability to, are there groups where people can go to get help, or how do first responders who are experiencing any type of mental health issues, how do they actually get help? What does that look like?
The process is, it's not perfect, but I think we're in a place now in the law enforcement community where they know it's not perfect, but it's something and it's improving. We learn through failures, and while the groups that are out there and the programs that they have may not be perfect, I think their intentions are perfect or getting good. And so when there's something that could be done better, they recognize it and they're improving on it. So the mental health problems, I should say, these days are now getting to a point in society where it's no longer, taboo.
Yeah.
And it's not weird anymore. Now people are, they're able to talk about it, and it's not like they're not going to shame me for it. They've been in those shoes too. I think we're lucky right now in Vegas to have, I'm not going to say his name and stuff, but, our boss, the sheriff of Vegas, he understands it better than probably anybody before him. He really does. And so when he got elected, he was determined to do something about it, right? So he created a whole bureau that's called the Wellness Bureau, and it's just one mission, one goal. And it's learning and it's evolving, right? It's pretty new, but we're spoiled in Vegas. So if I need help, I need to reach out. There's phone numbers I can call, people I can talk to. There's doctors. They'll get you the help. They'll go bend over backwards for
How
you.
long ago did that get started?
So the Wellness Bureau's been around since he's been sheriff, which has been, a couple of years now. But, your brother really helps out with a bunch of, I forget the name of the stuff he does.
I know he had some acronym, CARE.
I can't remember what it is, but
I do know he's always helping with, people will call him if they're in serious distress.
Yeah.
And he'll be the one that takes that call.
So on top of, your brother helps teach those kind of classes, and there are groups that get together and talk about stuff, and just a, community like you were talking about, being able to talk about the stuff you're going through with other people who are going through it, just, no different than somebody who'd go to an AA meeting. It's pretty new, but it helps, right?
Man, if all that happens from this conversation is that people will just try that.
Yeah.
Chase taking that step. Maybe you mentioned on LinkedIn that you had experienced substance abuse or alcohol abuse or something, and maybe it was the bottle use you had mentioned. I had a similar experience for 6 years. I was an opiate addict, and such a tough time, dude. Such a weird time in my life. And the need that I had to be around people when I was dropping off of that chemical, that oxytocin, which is literally the love chemical, the feeling that you get of love that was just artificially happening through opiates in my life. I've been clean for 15 years. I do want to make that mention. But that need that I had to be around people, to just feel that chemical again and just have people go, you're going to be okay, and you're going to get through this, and to recognize that, it was such a huge part of my journey back to sobriety there. So, for you, if you don't mind talking about it, can you talk a little bit about how that impacted your mental health?
Well, it's it's like a double-edged sword. The experiences you go through when you replay it over in your brain over and over and over, there's nothing you can do that'll shut it off. You don't get to pick how your brain responds to things. I don't get to pick how we're just born this way, right? And so while my specific shooting was pretty clear-cut, cut and dry, if you put 1,000 people in my shoes, they would have all done the same thing. The next few days, for whatever reason, your brain will just throw it on a loop. It's just like somebody's hitting replay. And it's not. And so it gets distracting. You could be driving down the road and somebody's talking to you, and it's like there's no audible whatsoever. Your just brain is rewatching the moment over and over and over. So for me, it was well, I can shut this up. Funk. Glug, 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 glug. Okay, it's gone. It was just a way for me to quiet out the noise, which, there's people who are going to argue with me on this. They're like, that's not the answer. Oh, really? Then why did it work? It works. I promise you, you can shut your brain off.
It's an answer at that moment.
It was a solid answer at that moment. And the problem is you start to rely on that answer over and over again, and that becomes the norm. So while I will disagree with people, they're like, it's not a fix. I'm like, oh, it fixed it. But now you have to deal with it all the time, and you can't. For me, shutting that brain off right away definitely worked, but then when it wears off the next day, alcohol's a depressant. Now you start to think about it again, but now the darkness is coming. So everything just becomes numb and dark. And then what do you do to get rid of that? You drink again. And then you're just in this
perpetual
spiral. So to find an avenue where I didn't need to shut my brain off with that was the whole point of like putting it down on paper. And then as soon as I could do that, it was like weight off my shoulders. And I'm not saying I'm perfect and not saying, I wouldn't screw up, but my fix was this, not this.
Yeah.
100%.
That's powerful, really powerful. And writing for me is maybe a different experience because I'm pretty forceful sometimes when I write. I kind of have to make myself do it. So do you find yourself enjoying it when you do it? Do you look forward to the time when you get to write?
Dude, that's an interesting question. No, I don't. I don't enjoy writing because when I am on my keyboard and I'm typing are the moments I'm struggling and I'm crying inside. If it's not coming out, it's like inside I feel like crying. Yeah. And so I don't enjoy writing, but I feel like when I'm in those moments, it's very easy to see in the words, the art that's being created through those words, those dark feelings or sad feelings or, just the emotions are really raw when I'm hurting. And so putting those words down on paper for me, and my family recognizes it, like if they come in the room and they're like, oh, he's on his laptop, like leave him alone. And then I'll finish, a couple thousand words or whatever. And I'm like, all right, I'm good. I can get up. I can go back to being normal. So it's not fun to write. And the cool thing about having a side job or my main job is that I'm not pressured to like have a deadline or, I need 5,000 words by the end of the week. It's just when I want to do it. Yeah. And so it feels there's no pressure, there's no rush to it. It's just, okay, here's the raw me. You guys, here's what it looks like in my head or in my heart, which is not a fun place to be for some people. But, when I'm typing, it's all like right there.
And where does that go? Is that for you? Is it a blog? Is it a future books? Is it like, because now I want to put pressure on you to write another book because that one was so good. So,
it goes in my filing cabinet most of the time. Yeah. It does. It really does. I am working on 2 books, but I can't really decide which one to pour like all my attention in, but I'm having so much fun with both of them. Yeah. So the one is just super fun. Has nothing to do with cop work. It's complete fiction BS. My parents are probably going to read it and be like, oh boy. What did we do? Yeah, I don't want to say what it is, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun to write, but it's complete nonsense. But it's going to be good. It's really good. I already have it out in my head where it's going to go. That is just 100% me trying to be an artist. The other one is going to be a little bit more close to heart and painful and hard to put down on paper. But I'm working on that one. I think I'll put the fun one to the side and give more attention to the one that's meaningful. I can touch on it a little bit if you want. Yeah, I would love to hear it, dude. So recently I had a coworker who, he's not really ashamed of it at this point. He tried to take his own life, and he's a friend who's very, very close to me, very, very close to me. And he was stopped by his wife, and he went to the hospital that night. And I got a phone call from my commander in SWAT, and he's like, "Hey, I know you're close to so-and-so. Can you come down to the hospital? It's like late at night. Say no more. I'm on my way." So I go down to the hospital, and I got to the hospital, and he's like in these pajamas that they give you, and he was drinking, and he had quite a bit of smell to him with the booze and stuff. And as soon as I walked in, he just like hit the floor and like crushed and crumbled because he didn't know anybody was called. So him and I hugged it out, and he cried, I cried, and just he wanted to end it. And he's like, "I don't want to be here anymore." And the cool thing is, once again, toting the Wellness Bureau, there were a lot of people because it happened. And because his position at work and because people found out about it, they stepped in, right? Not because they had to step in or they should step in, but they stepped in. And so they got him in a facility. They got him the help he was looking for. And he was able to go to California and get some treatment. And he's doing really good right now. He's freaking a stud. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to take his story of what happened to him and then show people his path out. And so what we did was, I like to think that my stories are pretty good and I'm okay with fiction, right? So we're going to tell the story of what led them to this point. So for him, it was a shooting. So we had a shooting where our number 1 guy in the door got shot 8 times. Well, he was the number 2 guy. So he was involved in the shooting too. He fired back. I can already see this, man. It's so good. The first part, each chapter or story we're going to tell in this book is going to tell the story of the incident that was the day for them that started this journey of the struggles. So we're going to tell it in a fictional manner, but it's going to be, they're true. But it's going to be told in a way that when you're reading it, you're going to be in those shoes, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to tell the story like you're watching a movie. And then we're going to tell the next part of the story is like the fallout. And then after the fallout, we're going to touch on like their way up and out of this hole. But with this first story, and it's going to be the first one in the book, it's going to just, people are going to read it and they're just going to, they're going to lose it because I have permission from him to use his actual suicide letter that he wrote the day he was going to do it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's going to be in it. So we're going to tell the story of here's the day that, you know, changed everything. Here's like their journey down. And that's going to include that suicide letter. And then here's the journey up. So, you know, everything I've been doing, I've been working with him on and getting his permission to tell his story. And he's like all about it because, you know, when we have those friends commit suicide, it's like, what could we have done?
Yeah.
What possibly, you know, especially the ones where there's no letter or there's no note or there's no signs that at least we didn't see, you know, if we weren't able to pick up on those signs. And so hopefully when people read this, they're going to be like, oh, wow, okay, here's what I can do. But it's not going to be about suicide or anything. It's more or less the whole book's going to be based off of like, here's what happens. We fail, right? All of us. We all fail, except for Jason. But we all fail in our life. But what are you going to do? Are you going to sit there and suck your thumb, or are you going to crawl out of it and learn and progress? And so it's going to be all about here's failures, here's people who failed, and now look at them. You know, like here's where they were and here's where they are. Yeah. So when you're in that spot in your failures, you can look at somebody else and be like, okay, here's the path that they took out. Yeah.
That journey of transformation and that journey of being able to come out of that darkness is such a powerful part of our story. You know, I think that when we're able to intervene in someone's life at a time when it could have been over for him, but now we know he's still here. We can learn about what could have been the warning signs, what could have been done, what people could have been more aware of, you know, and it helps us to, I think, build humanity to know, like, what can we do to help people's human experience just be more, I don't know, at times palatable, I think is a word for some people, because it's so hard that just being able to palate it and just go, okay, it's not so bad. You know, there's times in I don't think my life has ever been so tough. Like, I've been very blessed. I really have, with little in our life compared to what other people have to deal with. But, man, the times that are hard, they are very hard. And, you know, my wife has dealt with a lot of her own mental health issues that she's been very public about, and she's turned corners, and I've watched her turn those corners. And when you turn it and you're in that person that was once, like, feeling those feelings and you're not anymore, you just want to tell people about it. Yeah. You know, you want to share it. And, you know, I appreciate that you're putting activity behind it because you're sharing it, because I don't know what how dark it got for you. But I know that you have dealt with enough people that have been in these experiences that you can share some details that I don't know if there's other places we can get them, you know, except to pull them up from the depth. Like, I keep saying this, but Scott, my cousin, said this the other day, and it stuck with me. He said, you know, the gift that we have is found inside the wound. And so when the wound is shown, so is the gift after the wound is healed. You know, and it takes that time to get there. And I feel like that's what you're helping with. That's what I feel like OctoberStrong did for me in a way, because for me, I didn't have a displeasure with officers, but there was a narrative that was being written. I didn't have any type of feeling towards nurses or first responders or in any way that was in any way negative, but I walked away going, oh my gosh, look at these people. Look at what they do. Look what they've sacrificed. Look what they're willing to give for us. And it made me just, every conversation that I've had since, it's brought that, the book has come to my mind, and I've gone, hey, have you read this? It's about you and how cool you are, you know, because I think a lot of people that are in those positions will go, man, that's my story. Like, I've had that too. Because as cool as the stories are, as unique as they are, to you, they're not unique in the whole world. Like, there's stuff like this that's happening. So thank you for sharing it. I really appreciate it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You know, kind of going out here, I know that we want to make sure that everybody is able to get the book. So how do I get OctoberStrong if I want to get it?
Amazon's probably the fastest and easiest way, obviously. You can order it on Barnes & Nobles. We actually set up a website where they can order it on the website as well, but we put a little piece in there where they can order a signed copy.
Oh, cool.
So that's something I want to do.
And what's the website?
That's OctoberStrong.com.
OctoberStrong.com.
Yeah.
Cool.
So when I set that up, my publisher was like, dude, what if this sells like millions? Like, you're going to be in trouble. I'm like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
It may take me a few months, but I'll do it. Like, my word is my word. So, yeah.
Good. And then when these sell, I know that there is also a nonprofit that you work with. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when we compiled the stories originally, like between my stories and Caitlin and I kind of figuring it out. And then I was kind of pointed in the right direction to just like the Michael Jordan of editors in the book industry. She is amazing. Lori Lynn. So there's her shout out. But probably one of the best people in the industry. I was kind of just through a friend pointed in that direction. And so she kind of read what I had, and she calls me on the phone. She's like, hey, are you sitting down? I'm like, yeah. She's like, so this is lightning in a bottle, and I don't tell this to anybody, but you have no idea what you've just given me. She's like, I do this for a living, and I've never told anyone this. So, and I'm not a writer, right? So I was like, okay, cool, thanks. Like, it didn't really dawn on me, like, what I had, but she saw what it was. So she's like, this is going to make some money, dude. Like, buckle your seatbelt, because this could go like viral and crush it. You don't know what you have. And she's like, that doesn't happen to first-time authors. And I'm like, time out. I'm not an author. I'm a cop. I just wrote some cool stories. But she's like, just sit down, because like this could make some dough. And that got my wheel spinning. I'm like, oh, what do I do? So I'm telling everybody else's stories. They're not necessarily mine. Like, there's one story in that book that belongs to me, and I won't say what it is, but only one story is really mine. And I don't want to, like, just the thought of, like, making money telling someone else's story, like, just seemed pretty dirty, almost like stealing. So I wanted to not take the money, and I didn't care how much it was. So I owed a lot to Randy Sutton. He was my mentor through the whole process. He kind of, hey, talk to this guy. Okay, now send it to this lady. And he walked me through the whole process, like literally held my hand. Okay, not literally, Randy, sorry. But basically held my hand. And he runs the charity, The Wounded Blue. And so it just made sense for me to donate whatever we could to the Wounded Blue. So all the money's going to the Wounded Blue. All the proceeds going to them.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Now, I'm going to challenge you on that. I love that. I think that's amazing. And also, you did a great job writing this book, and it's absolutely okay for you to profit from a book that you wrote.
Maybe like the third or fourth one.
So in the future, as you build it, feel free to profit from that, because these stories, while they are others, they're stories that had to be written. They had to be put together. And I respect the artistry of what you've put together. I respect I know what she means when she says lightning in a bottle, because your idea of how you put this together is so duplicatable. You can do so much with this. And I know that you've got these other ideas. I'm looking forward to all of them, because kind of seeing through someone else's eyes like that is a really special experience. And I think the most recent novel before that was like Lord of the Rings. So I don't know that I was looking through Gollum's eyes. I'm learning the same thing as I do learning through Clarence's eyes and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's been a very powerful experience to sit with you here today, and to be able to learn more about you. I look forward to being able to read the next books. Thanks, Taylor.
Awesome. Thanks, Robbie.
Yeah.